At dawn on August 11, 2025, calm waters near Scarborough Shoal erupted into turmoil. Just 12 nautical miles from the reef, the Philippine Coast Guard patrol vessel BRP Suluan was escorting two small civilian boats carrying food and fuel for local fishermen. It was a routine humanitarian mission, but in the South China Sea, even a simple supply run is a high-stakes gamble. On their trail, the Chinese Coast Guard cutter CCG-3104 closed in aggressively, already firing its high-pressure water cannons. Arcing jets slammed against the Suluan's bow with the force of a hammer, capable of smashing glass, dislodging antennas, or tossing sailors overboard. But the situation escalated beyond the usual gray zone harassment. Out of the haze, the massive silhouette of a Mosper People's Liberation Army Navy destroyer, hull number 164, appeared. A Liu Yang 3 class guided missile destroyer bristling with weapons. This was no crowd control vessel. It was built for battle, and it was steaming directly into contested waters. Within minutes, the three ships, the Suluan, the Chinese cutter, and the PLAN destroyer, were locked in a dangerous triangle on a collision course, a powder keg of strategic importance. Scarborough Shoal might appear to be nothing more than a ring of reefs and turquoise shallows, but geopolitically, it is one of the most contested maritime flashpoints in the world. The shoal lies just 124 nautical miles from the Philippine island of Luzon, which places it well within the Philippines' 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. By international law, Scarborough Shoal should fall firmly under Philippine jurisdiction. But in 2012, Chinese vessels seized control of the shoal and have never left. Since then, Beijing has maintained its claim by deploying a rotating presence of Coast Guard cutters, maritime militia boats, and, when it wants to send a stronger signal, full-fledged naval warships. In 2016, an international arbitral tribunal ruled that China's sweeping claims over the South China Sea were invalid under UNCLOS. Beijing, however, dismissed the ruling outright and continued to fortify its position on the water. This dynamic has created an ongoing cycle of confrontation. For the Philippines, every patrol into Scarborough's waters is a political statement that they will not concede their rights. For China, every interception is an assertion that control rests with the ships it deploys, not with international rulings. Scarborough Shoal has thus become a powder keg where even a minor incident can flare into international tension. The pursuit turns deadly. The BRP Suluan's mission on August 11th was straightforward: escort the civilian relief boats safely to their fishing grounds and return to port. Yet, as expected, any Philippine vessel venturing so close to Scarborough Shoal attracted Chinese attention. The Coast Guard cutter CCG-3104 surged forward, pushing its twin diesels to the limit, spray boiling off its bow as it narrowed the gap. Unlike past encounters, the Chinese captain attempted a high-risk interception maneuver. Instead of simply shadowing the Suluan from behind, he swung wide to port, aiming to cut directly across its bow. This is a classic naval tactic designed to force another vessel off course, but at speeds nearing 20 knots, the margin for error shrinks dramatically. On the Suluan, radio calls were sent out, but they were met with silence. The Filipino crew, aware of the political stakes, held their course carefully, avoiding any sudden move that might be portrayed as aggressive. Yet as the cutter pressed forward, its intercept line didn't just threaten the Suluan, it crossed directly into the path of the PLAN destroyer. The massive warship, which normally patrolled in coordinated formations, was steaming ahead as part of what appeared to be a layered blockade. The Chinese Coast Guard captain, focused entirely on the Philippine patrol vessel, failed to recognize the danger of his own maneuver. By the time the destroyer's crew sounded warnings, it was too late. When steel collides, the impact was brutal. The smaller cutter's bow smashed against the destroyer's port side. Steel buckled, bulkheads groaned, and the forward gun mount twisted under the force. For the cutter, the damage was crippling. The front end crumpled like paper under a fist, its engines cut, and the ship sat dead in the water with its bow submerged. Several crew members who had been visible on deck seconds before vanished from sight as the sudden halt tossed them back violently. The destroyer, far larger and sturdier, absorbed the hit with only superficial damage. Long scrapes along its hull, streaks of bare metal where paint had sheared away. But the shock reverberated through the vessel, rattling fittings and knocking sailors from their posts. On board the Suluan, the Philippine crew watched in disbelief. They had been bracing for another blast from the water cannons, only to witness the extraordinary sight of two Chinese ships colliding with each other. The boom of metal against metal rolled across the water, a sound that no sailor forgets. Radio silence and refused aid. In the chaotic seconds that followed, the Suluan's radio operator immediately opened a channel, offering medical aid, search and rescue support, and damage control teams. The call was repeated multiple times in both English and Mandarin. Each attempt was met with silence. Through binoculars, Filipino officers observed the aftermath. The destroyer's crew quickly began damage control drills along the port side, inspecting the long scrapes. The cutter's crew had retreated toward the stern, away from the mangled bow, moving cautiously and with visible disorientation. Despite the obvious need for help, neither ship acknowledged the Philippine offers. For Manila, the refusal spoke volumes. Accepting aid from the very vessel you had been attempting to intimidate would be politically humiliating. It was preferable, even if dangerous, to handle the situation internally rather than admit vulnerability. Conflicting narratives on land. Within hours of the collision, both countries released statements that highlighted their starkly different approaches. In Manila, the Philippine Coast Guard was swift and outspoken. Spokesman Commodore J. Tariella condemned the Chinese maneuver as reckless and atrocious, stressing that it violated international collision prevention regulations. He emphasized that the Philippine crew had acted responsibly, offering aid immediately after the collision, which the Chinese refused. For Tariella, this refusal reinforced the idea that Beijing prioritized saving face over ensuring the safety of sailors. In Beijing, the story was entirely different. Chinese Coast Guard spokesman Gan Yu acknowledged that a maritime encounter had taken place but made no mention of a collision. Instead, he described the incident as part of routine, lawful enforcement within what China considers its territorial waters. State media released no photographs of the damaged cutter, and official statements treated the event as routine rather than exceptional. The contrast was striking. For the Philippines, this was an alarming miscalculation with potential international consequences. For China, it was business as usual. Political fallout and strategic stakes. The day after the incident, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. addressed the nation, vowing that Filipino patrols would continue. He declared that these waters belonged to the Philippines and that the country's duty to its fishermen would not be deterred. His words underscored Manila's determination to continue asserting its rights, regardless of Chinese intimidation. In Beijing, silence prevailed. There was no hotline call between the two militaries, no joint investigation, and no admission of fault. The lack of response was itself a statement. In the South China Sea, silence after a mishap often reveals more than official words. It signals a desire to bury the incident and avoid political embarrassment. The stakes around Scarborough Shoal extend far beyond the Philippines and China. If this deep dive helped you make sense of what really happened off Scarborough Shoal, show it some love. Hit like, smash that subscribe button, and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next breakdown. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.